Okay, so I think you're gonna do it. Yeah. We are doing a diffusion weight imaging of fiber bundles and callosal agenesis. So this is just our preliminary tractography analysis. We haven't completed all the subjects, but this is what we've been seeing.
Yeah, so
Go
what is like our main product is on callosal agenesis. So just a brief introduction, which if you don't know, it's the absence of the corpus callosum, which is the main white matter tract responsible for communication between the cerebral hemispheres. And it is a really rare condition, and it occurs only in 1% in every 1,000 births. And it can lead to social, linguistic, and different impairments as in the research paper that's done by Wang and Malcolm.
Yes. So here you see like the red tracks are the corpus callosum, and then you see in the figure at the bottom a really cool image of agenesis. So it's pretty noticeable in the MRI images. So this study,
I'm trying to make it so you can see.
So this was a diffusion tensor imaging study. So what that means basically is that we're tracking the movement of water molecules along axonal fibers in the brain. And we do this through a measure called fractional anisotropy, which is basically a scale of the direction. So 0 being really random direction, 1 being highly directional. And it's a useful biomarker for like analyzing the health and structural connectivity of white matter tracks. If you have low FA scores, you could be indicative of possibly demyelination or axonal damage, and higher values indicate a strong connectivity and like better track organization.
Yeah, so we based it off. We compared it to a previous study that was done where there was a 70-year-old female patient who had a split brain, that was basically her corpus callosum was surgically removed to relieve a tractable epilepsy, and she was called a split brain patient. And unlike the agenesis patients, she did have slower interhemispheric transfer and like had all the symptoms of like she was social problems as well as a disconnection syndrome.
Yeah, so this paper was done by Jason and others in Miami. So this is our current study is building off of that. This time instead of with a split brain patient, it was with an agenesis, but still the lack of the corpus callosum is the evident feature here. The only difference was that hers was a surgically severed. So this is the results of Jason's paper in 2019. You can see here that we're analyzing the FA values of the interhemispheric tracts and the intrahemispheric tracts. We're doing this to see if there is a subcortical or any type of extracallosal pathway where information can travel between hemispheres, since they don't have a corpus callosum, which is the main way that would occur. And higher FA values could be indicative of that. So we see here in the interhemispheric tract plot that the ventral middle cerebellar peduncles and the decussations of the dorsal and ventral have way higher FA values. So in this graph, the y-axis is the normalized FA, and these lines represent 3 standard deviations, either above or under. So if you're past that point, then it's considered like a significant difference in the FA score. And we did this for the middle cerebellar peduncles, superior cerebellar peduncles, which are shown down here, and for the interhemispheric tracts, intrahemispheric tracts, which goes front to back, such as the arcuate, the uncinate, and the cingulum. And for the cingulum here, we see that actually a lower FA score, which is indicative of possible damage done during the surgery. So in our study, we expect not to see that value anymore. So what can we learn from callosal agenesis? Our main goals are, can we observe differences in the structural connectivity of the intra or interhemispheric white matter tracts between agenesis patient and controls? And does the callosal agenesis patient also share the same elevated FA values we saw in the previous figures for the middle cerebellar peduncles and superior cerebellar peduncles? So how do we do this? So we had one child with callosal agenesis and 15 age-matched controls. And I wasn't here for this, but this is the data acquisition, which was done with the Siemens scanner in Miami. We got the T1 structural image, which is useful for like placing our ROIs, which I'll talk about later. And you see that the voxel dimensions aren't exactly spherical. So we had like a little bit, the height difference made it a little bit difficult for tracking, which we'll explain later as well. And the pre-processing steps were done by Haley and Jason. They had to fix like the phase encoding distortions, which is basically how you acquire the slices in the MRI will distort the image. So if you collect them in the posterior anterior direction, you see that it's kind of smushed the back of the brain, and the anterior posterior direction is kind of extended towards the back of the brain. And then Haley made this a script and Jason that fixed this distortion down here.
I think those are all those, the same.
Oh no, they're different.
It looks slightly different.
This is also the agenesis patient, so they don't have the corpus callosum. This is the Eddie corrected.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. 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 So now going on to the tractography, which we did do. Finding the exact tracking parameters was difficult because we didn't use the exact same parameters as the split brain paper. One reason for this is that the split brain paper used a lower angular threshold and a bigger variable step size because they tracked their data was from 2 different scanners, which had different voxel sizes. And then this one, all of our data was in the same voxel size. So we made our step size half the voxel width so that when you collect data, you wouldn't skip a voxel. And then we also increased the angular threshold because in the split brain paper, they decreased it to resolve crossing fibers, but this was having an issue for tracking some fibers like the uncinate, which have like a very directionally that curve a lot, so we weren't getting those fibers really well. But everything else, all the other parameters remain the same. So we used ROIs, ROAs, and seed regions. So ROIs are regions of interest, ROAs are regions of avoidance, and seeds are like where you start your tracking. And these were manually mapped based off of anatomical like regions in the brain that we got from like the structural image. And this is a figure from Jason's paper in 2019 that shows how we plotted these ROIs and ROAs. So you can see here on the right that although like we technically use spherical ROIs in like the DSI program, they come out as kind of like ovals because of the voxel dimensions. So then after we track these fibers, we then do our FA analysis, which is how Jason produced the figures seen in the first few slides, where we normalize our FA and by dividing like the absolute FA values by the whole brain FA values, and then we transform them into z-scores and using the mean and standard deviation of the control groups. So then we can like analyze the significance. So we start with the whole brain seeding to get our whole brain FA. So this is the callosal agenesis patients. So you can clearly see like the lack of the corpus callosum here. That's pretty cool. We have the pharonoaxial and the horizontal directions.
That's pretty.
Yeah. And then these are the 3 controls that we did. Yeah, you can now see like the corpus callosum in the middle between connecting brain hemispheres. It's kind of hard to see up there, but I don't know why the brightness is so low.
Better on this one.
Can you put the brightness up here? That's fine. Okay, trust me, it's there. It's hard to see. Okay, and then we're going on to the interhemispheric fibers. So we're looking at the middle cerebellar peduncles, and the top is our agenesis patient. We kind of had trouble getting a thicker dorsal decussation down here, but our ventral was pretty strong. And this is, you can see from the horizontal view how it looks. And these are 3 controls down here, which are pretty fine. This is the superior cerebellar peduncles. Again, no problem, no real issues here. Some extraneous tracks down here, but pretty easy to identify. And then we have the arcuate. Arcuate could be a little bit tricky because some of the anatomical, the structural images were tilted. So exactly identifying it when the image is shifted is a little bit difficult, but we still were able to find plenty of tracks, especially after increasing the angular threshold. And then this is the uncinate. It's the one we talked about also for the angular threshold. It connects the frontal and temporal regions. Okay, we didn't do the cingulum because we're having trouble with identifying the exact track in the agenesis patient. So once we isolate that track, we'll show you the results for that. But then now we have the FA analysis. So looking at the FA analysis, we don't see the effect of higher FA values in the interhemispheric fibers anymore. So the ventral MCP and decussations of the dorsal and ventral side were now within the below the significance threshold.
So they're no different from the controls.
So they're no different from the controls. The red dot indicates the agenesis patient, and the black dots indicate our controls that we did. And the same goes for intrahemispheric fibers. We didn't see any significance in the 2019 paper, and again, we don't see any significance here. The reasoning for tracking the intrahemispheric as well, even though we're looking at a difference at the corpus callosum, is that there's thought that maybe that the information has to travel along these fibers in order to get to a different interhemispheric fiber to cross over, since they can't use the corpus callosum. So maybe those fibers would also have an increased FA value. But here we don't see any evidence of that. And then once we get our cingulum data, we should see that we shouldn't see the lower FA score for the right cingulum, because that was for in the 2019 paper, that was because of damage done during the surgery, most likely. So there's no structural data here that indicates the agenesis patient has like a compensatory subcortical route for interhemispheric communication. So we're wondering, like, how is the agenesis patient compensating for the lack of the corpus callosum? Because they present in some ways better than the split brain patient for when it comes to like not having that classical disconnection syndrome. But it's clear that, at least from these results, that it's not going through the subcortical pathway. So maybe we can also do like a functional connectivity study that looks at how these agenesis patients are compensating. Yeah.
With the agenesis people have better transfer?
In the review that Lucina wrote, it showed that they did not have like the same classical disconnection syndrome, where like you present information in like the right visual hemisphere and then you're not able to like speak what that information is. Like they can, I'm pretty sure, because that's the classical way. Unless I'm misunderstanding that, but in the paper, it showed that they had better interhemispheric communication, like faster, slower than regular like controls, obviously, but much faster, not much faster, but significantly faster than split brain patients. Yeah, so they're in the middle. Yeah.
Yeah, what's interesting about callosal agenesis, like you said, it's 1 in 1,000, live births, but sometimes they have like no symptoms at all, and nobody ever notices that they have callosal agenesis. And so, for example, this patient was someone who came in for our study just as a regular, typically developing kid. And then we noticed when we scanned them that, oh, they have callosal agenesis.
Or the parents.
Did the parents tell us beforehand?
The kid doesn't know.
Oh, the kid doesn't know. Yeah, so basically, like, there's no like actual functional deficits in this particular kid. And oftentimes there isn't. Oftentimes they're just like fine. And then like because they had a scan, incidentally, someone noticed, oh, they actually don't have callosal. But has been associated with greater incidence of autism. So oftentimes there's like higher prevalence of autism in kids with callosal agenesis. So it's an interesting thing where like a lot of the time there's no symptoms at all, but sometimes there's like symptoms of autism. So we don't really study this much in the lab, but we just happened upon it because we happened upon a subject who had it. So we collected the data and you guys are exploring it, but we don't have any additional subjects, with agenesis. If we want to do this, the group at Caltech has been collecting data for years on callosal agenesis. So we could collaborate with them if you guys are interested, as far as getting more data on this syndrome. But yeah, this is definitely a good place to start, like as far as just looking at the tracks that we thought might be different.
Yeah, so that was just the preliminary analysis. We still have a lot more control subjects to go through, but the initial data suggests that there is no elevated FA values.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
That's great.
Yeah. So are any of the tracks, like you said, some like particularly hard to identify, or you have more challenging?
The more challenging ones for me have been the cingulum and the arcuate. some cases, because the structural images aren't exactly centered with like the voxel, like they have the brain a little bit shifted. It's the ROIs, since the ROI dimensions are like not exactly even, making like having a spherical shape will then like pop up outwards and grab tracks that you don't want. So you have to do like,
Clean them up.
you have to like, it's a lot of cleaning up. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's hard to explain through here unless I actually show you, but
We find the same thing, but
Yeah, even like the dorsal MCP, sometimes I find it hard to just get that specifically, and sometimes I get extra tracks.
We need to read
The
not the
pruning,
structural, but the.
the what, sir?
after-
Oh,
There's a way to put the colors. And then that's about that.
okay.
okay.
And then you can restructure the image.
Oh, yeah, you can create images where you have the structural and then the diffusion map on top, and it looks really
But
cool.
for the tracking, if the structure is not in the same space of location, and see if you can find the setting that puts the background to the epic values.
Okay, I didn't know that was a thing. Okay, that'll help. Yeah. Yeah, no, doing DSI studios and Tracktop is a huge learning curve.
Yeah, no, this is like.
Yeah, it's a
great
good-
for project.
Yeah, it's great.
It only started since the middle of this semester.
Yeah. Pass this down.
Do that.
Pass it around. The table's too big for people to get at things. Yeah, this is a great start. Did you want to show us, what, did you have some images?
Yeah, I didn't. I mean, the images, I didn't show you like the ROIs, but I can go back, I can share my screen.
And we present this there.
The
Undergrad competition.
the SEML undergraduate and the psychology.
And even undergraduate research.
Oh, and undergrad, yeah.
Right.
Yeah, let me show you how it looks with the
Oh, I would check, especially that different space versus adults. Or diffusion tax, so this will be different between kids and adults. These are like things.
A little bit. I mean,
When they start, like, getting to the phone.
Yeah, 15 is, yeah, it's pretty.
Oh,
Yeah, I think it depends on the skin protocol, it can maybe also like have a hair control, like found in the HCP, not the data set. Or also like, if these are, if your current units not right, like certain, method, and if you want to run like whole brain, FA analysis, you see. Like, upper level, and there's the individuals that show up to be more compensated. That can be another.
do like a whole brain TBSS or something. Yeah, that might be a good thing to try, but these are just track specific.
Yeah.
When I've looked at adults versus kids and specific fiber tracks, the main thing I found in the past was like fiber density is greater in the adults than in the kids, but you know, the tracks are all there. They're just like, there's more myelinated in adults basically, so.
yeah,
you
so
know,
that's
Yeah.
some of the, FA value.
mhm.
Goal, I wasn't sure.
The process, doing this whole thing.
Yeah.
Oh. So that could be, yeah, but that could. Change some of the parameters.
Oh, really? Is there any like set of studies that outline parameters for kids, or you couldn't find any guide like that?
Is that one that we based it on? What was that one?
the parameters I use. So I did it based off of some tractography studies that used the uncinate, because we were specifically having problems with like tracking the uncinate because of the huge curve it has with a low angular threshold. But the one that you cited in your 2019 paper, you used the 30 degrees ones because apparently it resolves crossing fibers better in the MCP and STP. And with those tracks, I didn't have any problem with tracking with the 30-degree parameter. But with the uncinate, I had I had lots of issues doing that. So that's why we changed it.
The
Is
other,
there more crossing by there, right? Is that improved yet?
I don't know if they necessarily have more, but I don't know. Yeah.
So this is basically what I was talking about with the ROIs, so that when you would put a spherical ROI down, it will become like this oval shape. So you have to be very careful with how you place it because it will extend farther past than what you want in the height direction. So when doing like the cingulum and you see that the structural image is shifted, it's kind of difficult because then it extends past and grabs other fibers. So it's hard to exactly isolate the exact track you want. But I'm getting there. It's just I need to clean up the ROAs and stuff like that.
Yeah, the ROAs are really effective for that.
Yeah,
So what about Nodi? Can we do those analyses on these data?
I think this one has like single E values, so we have like that's no E value. But also wondering, if like a holistic classroom, and you can use on this one, although I think yes, as to like this separation is as a single place, a lot of like.
Yeah.
Classroom is like.
Yeah.
I had one question though, because it says here that the B value was like 1,000, but then it says for the diffusion tensor imaging, it uses like values less than 1750. So like, I'm not sure what that exactly means. Like, what is the difference between the two B values here? Because I know B value impacts like your FA. So if you have like, yeah, like you have a higher B value, you get more sensitivity to tracks, but also more possibilities for false positives. I know it increased your FA scores. That's why we normalize them, but
It must be just so long.
It sounds like a one to me, because FA is calculated by the DTI model, and DTI model is based on single B value, and it's supposed to be as low as possible, so if you have lowest B value as well, that would be this.
okay,
Values, we just extract all the equals to 1,000 things. So here I think we're fine, because the B value is still low. 750.
okay.
Oh, maybe it's not a one, and it's confirmation.
Yeah, that's a confirmation. That's why I was confused, because he said it was like 1,000, but then the DSI was telling me this, so I was like, okay.
Is this the patient you have up or?
This is the Agenesis patient.
It's much harder to find the singulum in these patients because there's no corpus callosum, so the two hemispheres are closer.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, I mean, they
Oh,
don't.
maybe the other question I was saying that, because she was in Agenesis.
Oh,
one?
yeah.
The super,
She-
she had normal development, so that's why she had seen it.
Oh, she definitely had cingulum, but it was damaged when
Yeah, it was
the
cut.
surgeon goes in and goes like this, it damages the
So
cingulum.
this kid doesn't have a single one at all.
Well, they probably have one. It's just offset from where you would see it in a normal kid, right? Because in a normal kid, you've got hemispheres and you've got the tracks between them. In agenesis, they're like pushed together like this, right? So the cingulum will be like really close to the midline. Because the cingulum is usually like, I don't know. Well, let's look at a normal kid cingulum. I guess you could see, they're usually like offset from the midline, right?
Yeah,
So,
Well, could you just do a whole basic unit?
Yeah.
And then see if we can just pick off the same one from that.
you want me to use the same parameters that I use in the paper?
Yeah.
Okay.
yeah, it's a good idea to do it. There is a best for the whole brain, PBSF, to look across all the tracks, all the ones. It might not work well with the patient, but I guess, because it might not fit the skeleton.
Yeah, you have to normalize it.
Yeah,
Yeah, before I find other differences.
Sorry, my computer's really slow.
Other DTI measures like MD, RD,
Mhm.
so maybe
Okay.
some specific cell changes will be affected by that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You-
we have a
you have
bunch
all
of
the
those.
other measures, right, besides FA?
Yeah, he has all
Oh,
of them, but
yeah.
we didn't put that in the other paper because it made it messy.
Put it here,
There are a whole bunch of.
Yeah.
like, well,
interpretation.
AG is different from this trap, but this trap it's.
Yeah, we can check here to see what they look like.
We just start cutting into it. and then
Yeah.
put it on one side. I don't think there is.
There has to be a single.
Yeah, they're not gonna look at it. I know. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
Wait, look at, go back to, I don't know, this corner, right? Like you should see the cingulum here, it's green, right? See, right? If you put-
This one right here, yeah.
Oh, okay. How do you for that?
That's just the whole FA map, right?
Let me undo everything real quick.
I forget, the anterior posterior fibers are green, right? Or-
Yes, green is anterior to posterior.
Yeah, so that must be the
Oh, that
same.
is, yeah.
Yeah, but there's no on the other side?
Yeah, I was tracking, I think, on the other side. And I
Hard to
couldn't.
see it on the other.
Let's see.
It looks asymmetrical, right?
This is going to be it's not this exact ROI I would use, but I'm just going to see what happens.
It's interesting that the hemispheres look very different, don't they? They look kind of messed up.
Here, let me use the actual. Yeah, let me put the actual parameters up because I don't remember it from heart.
Well, we'll take a look.
But like, look at that, isn't that interesting? Because it looks like it's pretty clear here, and then it like stops here and does something else. Maybe it, like, doesn't go in the other direction. Or it's that, the other one, it just goes on a different trajectory. Maybe.
Mhm.
I mean, if you don't have a big major fiber tract in the middle, everything else is gonna shift, you know, a little bit, so it's gonna be different than what you expect to see. And for comparison for the group, maybe you can show a normal range just so they can get, do you have a normal one on your computer?
Yeah, it's true. Like, okay.
We'll take a look at that
Mhm.
Wednesday.
Yeah, we never got another Agenesis, did we? That was the only one in all our hundreds of subjects. Yeah, yeah. But, yeah, there's lots of jobs that focus on this condition and they have. Bunch of data sets, you know, if you really, I just never. Yeah, we do a lot of things, so I never like pursued it, but like if someone wants to pursue it, there's lots of groups that, I almost did a postdoc with Ralph Adolphs in his lab. They've been collecting this data for like 10 years, so they got a bunch of it. That's just a typical kid, so let's look at these fibers, even that one looks like different in the two hemispheres a little bit, but.
Let's
Oh, is that too low?
That's not high.
Oh, yeah.
Let me put on the side.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, that's, you're starting to see
Oops.
it, right?
No, yeah, no.
Isn't that it?
They're coming in.
Is that it? I thought blue was inferiors,
Blue is infused.
so that's like the corticospinal.
Just coming to the Marinez.
Yeah, I don't use the cutting function much. I usually just use the ROIs, so it's kind of difficult for me to use. But
Shoot.
Yeah.
Oh, you can see the companies.
Yeah.
Oh, you wanna take off this?
Yeah, I want to take off the what?
Yeah. Second.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah. It's a steep learning curve to learn all the brain anatomy really quick.
yeah, it's like essential to know anatomy to try to do this stuff, otherwise you're just not gonna be able to know where you are.
Yeah, let me pull up the papers to see how exactly the ROI is looking there.
I mean, I don't know, I guess. There's something else. Before people that didn't subject to that a lot.
Well, yeah, we didn't do that before, it was just a case study, I guess we should do it.
This actually doesn't normalize.
No, so it'll do it for you.
But I'm just, I don't know, because the tracks are so hard. I don't know what's gonna be on that property.
Yeah. I know, resident, they're another resident structure, they don't even know if they have copies, they're like.
Well, we have the structure. The actual structure, we want,
Yeah.
but- Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. It's structure place.
Any
So
questions?
we just started tracking this. So-
Yeah.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
It's like a lot to learn.
Yeah. This is the RY's and C is used as cingulum, so it's like right there, like right above the ventricle, the lateral ventricle.
Is this from your paper?
This is 2019, the Jason. Yeah. Go back to PSI.
Any questions or comments? I mean, we have diffusion data on every kid, most every kid I think, that we've ever collected. There's some that, there's a lot missing.
Well, if you want. So we only chose 15 that had the both mechanical corrections.
Oh,
We didn't have that in the lot right?
okay, so it's the,
But we do have a bunch of kids with just one correction. So. But that's a lot more than
yeah. Well, so I mean, nobody in the lab has focused on this, but like if anyone ever wanted to, you could look at any of these measures and relate it to cognition, or, you know, look at some scores on some executive function thing, relate it to these. It's just nobody in the lab has taken an interest, but like, it's,
structure function.
yeah.
Right?
Oh, yeah, what do you do?
Default mode structure function one time.
Oh, yeah, what happened? Other measures.
That was a huge problem.
That's just- yeah.
But you can't do that stuff with that data. So if you want to do structure function stuff, you can often them. It's just really hard. We have to do.
Yeah. We also are collaborating with Anthony Dick, who has like hundreds of subjects of diffusion data. They're like younger, I think they're 6 years old or something.
Yeah. You don't do if you have them all pre-processed.
Oh, yeah.
So that's really easy to do.
And HCP develop. Yeah, for some reason, we like kind of sporadically will do a diffusion paper in the lab, but it's not like a main.
No, there's something sidetracked with this whole thing.
Yeah.
For some reason, we just wanted to do that really bad.
Oh, it's because I had published an fMRI paper with this patient in 2008, where we showed, in the 2008 paper, we showed like, we could find like ICA networks that were bilateral. And that's why it's like an interesting photo. It was like, well, what's supporting all this bilateral activation, even though there's no purpose reason. I think this was like a follow-up to that.
Oh, we were chasing this article about that.
Which was
There's a PNS paper and they're putting spirit brain, they found this anterior. Commissary.
Yeah,
They found this anterior commissary tract that went from anterior commissary to the lateral.
right.
And we tried to find that for a couple of years, and we found out it was just a regular tract.
It wasn't
It
anything,
wasn't anything special.
yeah, but they published like a paper on some, basically like
That was a
spurious finding, right? Like it was basically a spurious thing.
They were using low quality data, but if you use HTTP data, you can find out tracking every single person.
So it wasn't anything
So it
special.
wasn't anything, it was. What?
We should have written a rebuttal to that paper.
Yeah. But eventually we settled on the decussations in the brainstem. And so that we was to enter commission.
Mhm.
And then that's where this. So it took us a while to go from the commissions to the decussations, but.
Yeah.
That's where all the instances were, so.
Is that one of the normal kids?
Yeah, this is one of the normal. This is
That's what the cingulum looks like.
yeah. I did it really quickly, but
No, I didn't. We've done that.
where?
Yeah.
Oh, here. Yeah.
Is that how it is?
Because you can see it on the structure in the back.
Yeah. With these studies, it's hard to know like what's.
What's real?
Yeah.
You have to guess. Well, you have to look at, you gave them that book, right? The DTI, the Katani.
Yeah, the anatomy book
Yeah.
helps a lot.
Yeah, you, like keep referencing the anatomy book.
No, this whole thing is like a lot. So, even though-
Yeah.
Yeah, that's basically it. We haven't done all the subjects yet, so we have a lot more to get to.
Yeah, any questions or suggestions for the group?
Yeah, so like we had like a anatomy class in which like we were discussing about purpose pillars and tendons and the cortex. So like those sections and seems like in every individual group that have these structural changes. So in this case, like how they define the degree of agenesis. Like I understand there's partial and complete, but the degree of agenesis and then how is it associated with the traits? Are you guys also like planning to look at that?
Yeah, I think this patient had a complete agenesis. So often it's not a complete agenesis. There's often varying degrees of it, and I'm sure that that definitely will change things. I'm not very familiar with like, the literature of how that will affect like the behavior and the cognition of it. But I would assume that they would probably have different connectivities because there's still some there. There's still in some hemispheric connections. So
Yeah.
It's hard to tell because we know that they look at those, you don't know if they're real or not.
But I thought the Agenesis, they do have an anterior commissure, right?
I need to check at your
You
review.
didn't check for this.
Well, you can, for the corporate closing, if you were the FA,
Mhm.
you can still get some stuff crossing, but
Mhm.
you don't know if it's a false positive or.
Yeah, if I
Yeah.
pull up the
So when you put
Brain
it to 0.2, then we don't see it,
Mhm.
but we've got this DPI or.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to tell because the thresholding and stuff makes a big difference with the diffusion.
So you get a whole troubleshooting
Yeah,
systematic, put all the parameters, you change all
yeah,
yeah, the parameters really affect how like what type of tracks you can get because you can get nothing or you can get so much extra stuff.
yeah.
Let me pull up the whole brain for the agenesis patient so you can see.
Is DSI Studio, it's not that big, what is it?
that. It's just having that.
You can just download it and start it. But it's anyway. Yeah, I thought it was too big for that, but it's really working on.
No,
Yeah.
it takes a lot of all of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it heats up a lot when I use it, but it still works. The desktop computer is so nice though. It
I
goes just like in
just,
an instant.
I just installed FSL on my laptop because it wasn't already there. And I had to delete a bunch of stuff just, but the newer FSL takes up a lot more space than any previous version. And I just had to delete like everything else on my laptop just to get FSL on.
There's like this one thing that you can participate in, it's like undergrad research and creativity. So basically, you can like submit these images as your art, and also like put up your presentation.
Okay,
Yeah, they put that up on their website.
what's it called?
I probably.
Oh, okay.
That's cool.
You got one fiber, is that
Oh,
one?
this is the grade.
Yeah,
It doesn't seem to be anything.
There's not there, nothing.
there's nothing, yeah. Well, I wonder if I put the FA lower or the,
So they don't have an anterior commissure either? It looks
Oh, we don't know.
probably look, because I feel like I thought what that was an Agenesis finding. That they do have,
They still have.
yeah, that they.
Oh, look at
I
that.
could do On this with some Italians. Wait, I need to look at that review. Yeah, did you guys look at that Italian review? I'll send it to you. Forgot
Oh,
about
yeah,
it.
no.
Is that the one? No, I have one review on it that's just on split brain and another review that compares Agenesis.
it compares, but the one I read, it compares both.
Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah. Oh,
I think we also remember something about most people have it in the.
Yeah.
Now,
right. Okay, so it's variable still.
so this is the our parameters, and then that's the other one with the 0.1 and
Try copy right on the minutes.
yeah, let me see.
Yeah, this is why it's good to have these lab meetings. Basically, if anyone's, interested in learning about this, more about how to use DSI Studio or just about fiber
So-
tracking, we've got, Jason and then Haley and Prarthna and Jordi. So they're your sort of go-to people for The DTI advice.
I'm still learning, so I might not.
So no anterior commission.
No, it doesn't look.
Great. Where? That red thing, oh, that's like the optic.
That's the optic, yeah, that's,
Ah, yes. Everyone take your anatomy.
yeah.
Well, for this stuff, yeah.
Right down the middle, okay.
Oh, it is right there.
Oh, yeah. Is
Right there,
that
right
it?
there.
Is that it, or is that the
Yeah.
optic thing?
Were you trying to save that part, right?
I don't, that's not the optic one. Wait, say what? This part, right?
Little red part.
There.
You should look at that compared in between the groups, right? I mean,
Yeah, we should add that.
yeah, that should be a fun, because I think that's where you might find the difference. I think that's.
Yeah. I was wondering why you considered the
Mhm.
superior cerebellar peduncles as a interhemispheric in your paper.
Oh, because it actually has a decussation.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
It's just super hard to get the decussation.
Yeah,
Oh,
it's a good
okay.
question. But what happened in the split brain, just so you guys know, that was they used to do what's called complete commissurotomy, which is corpus callosum, anterior commissure, and hippocampal commissure. So that patient that we had in that paper is like one of the last in the line of people where they basically have stopped doing that complete commissurotomy surgery. So she didn't have any crossings except for the massa intermedia, which interconnects the thalami, and possibly posterior commissure, we don't know, but basically, so she was like as complete a commissurotomy as you can get. Whereas like in these callosal agenesis, they're born without a corpus callosum, like you said, with varying degrees, sometimes more or less is there, but they're not necessarily missing an anterior commissure, right? Like some of them could be and some of them aren't. So that's why in this case, like if you can find the anterior commissure and quantify it and compare it to the other normal controls, it might be more, it might
Yeah.
be thicker, or it might be have greater
I'll look
greater
up-
FA.
I look up papers for like how to isolate that.
Yeah, that would be good. Because we didn't do it for that patient because she didn't have, it was severed. So there's no point.
Okay,
But here, there is a point in looking at.
that's, yeah, that's,
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but the anterior, the posterior, there's anterior and posterior commissure,
Yeah.
right? And this is the,
so the anterior one like interconnects the amygdala and stuff like that. The posterior one, after we did a whole bunch of literature searching, it turns out it doesn't really interconnect the hemispheres. I think it's more like a really local little connection that something to do with the superior colliculi, I think. But basically the posterior commissure, I think, isn't really an interhemispheric commissure. It's funny because I spent like years like trying to like look at the literature to find out like what does the posterior commissure interconnect. And it turns out like there's only studies you can find are like in frogs and stuff like that. They don't even like talk about it in humans, but it's because it's not actually like a real commissure. It's just like a little local interconnector thing, or
okay,
like subcortical connections, as far as I remember. So I wasted a bunch of time trying to track the posterior commissure in the split brain patient. It turns out it was like a waste of time. Anyway, but you should track the anterior commissure in this
Okay.
patient.
Yeah, let's talk about that Wednesday.
Yeah, no, this is great stuff. Thanks, guys, for sharing. Don't forget to eat your snacks. Next, let me just tell you about the schedule coming up. I think we've got next week in the lab is Zach will be presenting. That's on the 17th. The week after that, I'm in San Diego, but we got Casey is one of our previous grad students who's now a professor. She's a clinical psychologist, so she'll be chatting with the lab over Zoom on the 24th. For those of you who are around for that. And then on May 1st, I have some random guy from Ireland presenting. That'll be fun. I'm just looking at the schedule to see if there's any slots open. So May 8th is open if anyone wants to present. Maybe.
Later, because I'm returning from Sweden.
Oh, right, you'll be at. meetings are, yeah, okay, so that's May 8th is open if anyone wants that. And then the week after that is May 15th. May 15th is also open. You want to do May 15th? Okay, great. Let's put you in there. For May 15th. And if there's anyone else who wants to, because for both, so for Bianca and Charles, you'll both be doing your what Haley just did, your prelims pretty soon, I guess, right? Like in the fall, something like that. So you definitely, I would suggest presenting your prelim aims in one of the lab meetings this year, so then you can use the summer to like finalize everything, and then you have to get your committee together and do it all in the fall. But maybe sometime towards the end of May or beginning of June, you might want to think about showing us your aims and getting some feedback and stuff like that. Yeah, use the live meetings to get feedback. That's the whole point. All right. Oh, what's this?
Oh, let me share both.
Yeah.
Share right there. Oh, there you go. I was just showing like where the anatomy was.
Mm.
I was just trying to see which one the yeah.
Yeah, I think there must be algorithms for tracking the interpuncture if you look at some of the Agenesis papers. Because I feel like that the Agenesis ones have done that a bit. I'm really not super familiar with this literature, but and there's not much of it. So
You see, you can find it. It's not too much to find all the time.
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, everyone.